How the Oprah confession has weighed on Lance Armstrong. 5 years since his confession to Oprah Winfrey, Lance Armstrong is still paying a price for what he did. In excess of $100 million, Armstrong said in an email to USA Today Sports on January 4. That's the cost to him so far. But it's not just because of his sins in cycling. He's also paying a price for that confession. By admitting to his doping and dishonesty, Armstrong exposed himself to fraud lawsuits, including a government civil case that goes to trial in May that could cost him nearly $100 million more. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn back trust and apologize to people," Armstrong told Oprah in the interview that aired January 17 and 18, 2013. More, judge rules 2 enemies of Lance Armstrong can testify against him. More, Livestrong adjusts to life without Lance Armstrong. 5 years later, the fallout has been uneven, legally and personally. He's met with a number of those he tried to trample. But some said his attempts at making amends were self-serving and that he still hasn't paid enough. "All that money he earned, he actually cheated to get it," said Kathy Lamont, wife of former cyclist and Armstrong critic Greg LeMond. "He didn't earn any of that honestly. It's all ill-gotten gains." Armstrong has disputed this and has had lawyers in at least 3 U.S. time zones and Great Britain to help defend him against it. That long fight finally might end with the looming trial, but questions remain about how much the Oprah interview helped or hurt his cause. It depends on the case. After 5 years, here's a look at where things stand. Armstrong, 46, once bullied and tried to ruin those who didn't go along with his longtime lie that he never used banned drugs to cheat in races. Armstrong told Oprah he owed apologies to such people and specifically named Emma O'Reilly and former cyclists LeMond, Tyler Hamilton and Frankie Andrew, along with his wife Betsy Andrew. "I owe them apologies, and whenever they're ready, I will give them," Armstrong said then. He's had meetings with some of them, including O'Reilly, the cycling team masseuse he once sued and called a prostitute after she told the truth about him. Some didn't buy it, including the LeMonds, who met with Armstrong in 2015. Greg LeMond had said Armstrong tried to destroy him for years after he had dared to question Armstrong's involvement with Michelle Ferrari, a doctor linked to doping. "I wouldn't say it was a heartfelt apology," Kathy Lamont told USA Today Sports last week. "It was a meeting, and I think he hoped to diffuse us continuing this." Greg LeMond, a former Tour de France winner, might testify against Armstrong in the trial in May. Armstrong's attorneys tried to prevent him from testifying, describing him as a combustible witness with nothing relevant to offer. But U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper disagreed. Betsy Andrew might also testify in the case, even though Armstrong's attorneys asked the court to prevent her from testifying and using the case as a soapbox for impugning Armstrong's character. The judge rejected that request. Andrew, an outspoken critic of Armstrong, had previously testified along with her husband in 2005 about Armstrong's use of banned drugs. Both since were smeared by the cyclist. A day before the Oprah interview, Armstrong called the Andrews to say he was sorry, but Betsy Andrew said Armstrong refused to meet with her when she tried to see him in person. It didn't take long after Mr. Armstrong's call that he resorted to his same old tactics of going after my husband and me, publicly as well as privately, Betsy Andrew told USA Today Sports last week. This time around, however, people see him for the pathological liar he is. "I tried to reconcile with him going so far as flying to meet with him in his hometown. When he refused to meet with me after I arrived in Austin, I knew his phone call was nothing more than a show for Oprah. I just wish he would now just leave us alone." USA Today Sports asked Armstrong for comment on his apologies and other aspects of his life since his confession. "If this is really the direction you're going in for any story, I have no comment," he wrote in an email January 12. In reply, a USA Today Sports reporter told Armstrong he wanted his input on what these people have to say about him now. Armstrong responded, "No comment. And no need to ever contact me again." USA Today Sports also contacted David Walsh, the Irish journalist who helped expose the Armstrong lie 9 years before the confession. Armstrong sued Walsh and the Sunday Times of London for printing an article in 2004 that suggested Armstrong was doping, a case that ended when the Times agreed to pay Armstrong £1 million. After the confession, Armstrong made financial reparations to the Times. But Walsh said he did not get an apology from Armstrong despite the fact that he had told Oprah that he would apologize to him. "My feeling is that Lance believed this was enough," Walsh said of the reparations. "I never wanted an apology and never expected one, so I wasn't disappointed. But I thought his telling Oprah Winfrey that he would apologize to me was a very funny from the interview because he was almost coerced into saying something he never wanted to say." Mike Anderson, Armstrong's former assistant, now lives in New Zealand and says nothing happened when Armstrong visited there in 2016. His conflict with Armstrong dates to 2004, when he said he found a performance-enhancing drug in Armstrong's medicine cabinet. Armstrong fired him, and Armstrong's attorneys since characterized him as a disgruntled employee out for financial gain. Anderson told the Associated Press in 2013 that Armstrong had made his life very, very unpleasant. "I have no expectation, nor interest in a feigned apology by Lance Armstrong," Anderson told USA Today Sports in an email. "Perhaps I know him better than most, since I spent a lot of downtime with him, and know the true measure of the man." Plaintiff's attorneys pounced on Armstrong with 5 fraud lawsuits against him within 4 months of his Oprah interview. They all cited the confession